Okay, a little bit clickbaity, granted, but I do believe what I'm saying here. That's the point. Not something I'd given an awful lot of thought to until myself and Gio did a Patreon breakfast show. And sometimes in the morning show, they can take a turn. We can talk about lots of different things. We talk about the build-up to the game a little bit, but people will put questions in the chat and whatnot. And somebody actually asked on there, actually, it might have been player ratings. Don't matter anyway. Whatever it was, and I think it was Mike who asked on there. Do you think that we would have been West Ham would have been further along? Would we be better than we are now if Moyes had kept his job the first time around? Basically, a real garbled way of saying, would it be better now if Moyes hadn't been sacked? It wasn't Mike that was garbled. It was me trying to repeat what he said. He was very lucid and very coherent. And I thought about it, and all I thought was, no, actually, I think he's better off for being sacked first time at West Ham. Now, this is a massive turnaround for me because I didn't believe that at all. In fact, I thought it was the wrong thing to do. This is going to bob and weave and go back and forth, by the way. But yeah, please stay with me because my mind's jumping all over the place on this. It was Moyes himself, by the way, who after Mike had asked this question in the video, Moyes started talking about it last week. Moyes started saying, he said, well, I thought we'd done a good job. I thought we'd done enough to stay. I was really disappointed. We thought we were going to stay on. And I listened to this interview and I thought, well, this is the most that I'd certainly heard David Moyes talk about his first stint at Upton Park. Now, let's just backtrack, rewind a little bit here. David Moyes gets the job at West Ham and is charged with a task of keeping us up. He comes in, said everybody's really unfit, really unfit. Comes up with a mantra, don't run, don't play. Converts Marko and Nautovic, who had not been playing well under Bilic, and I mean, he'd had a red card, been played wide. Anyway, Moyes came in, put Nautovic up front, put Lanzini right behind him. We got enough points, we stayed up. And we stayed up quite comfortably. It wasn't even the last game of the season. I think the last game of the season, I think we were there, it was against Everton, because we were all at the ground and then having a party on the boats afterwards. We were already safe. And so David Moyes thought he'd done his job, done what he'd asked to do. The football wasn't great under Moyes. I'll get to that in a second, which I think David Sullivan had said had put pressure on him, so he went out and got Pellegrini. Now, I would dispute that a little bit, because we were running polls at the time and there wasn't anybody else give for Pellegrini. Pellegrini was well down the list. But I think by and large, it'd be fair to say, the fan base was relieved to stay up. But if you go back and look at those old videos, then there was certainly some people were saying we should keep him. Some people were saying, well, maybe this is an opportunity to move on and get somebody new. But David Moyes felt he'd done his job. He picked up his bonus, which was a £2 million bonus. Thought job well done. Thought he was going to stay on. Obviously, he gets rid of him. Now, the first we've really heard about any comments on it were really when Moyes come back for his second stint. Pellegrini comes in, doesn't work out as everybody had hoped. I think David Sullivan has to go back to David Moyes really with his tail between his legs and probably say, David, I think I might have got it wrong. And has to eat a bit of humble pie. I think at the same time, David Moyes has got to swallow his pride. Can't be easy to then accept, let's be fair, accept a job back off a guy who you feel has wronged you. And I think his comments now would suggest that was certainly the case. Stuart Pearce didn't come back initially on the second stint. Stuart Pearce had been quite outspoken. Was outspoken on TalkSport, if you remember. Stuart Pearce was saying that he thought he didn't agree with Sullivan not giving him the job the first time. So now we've heard it off both people. We've heard it off Moyes, we've heard it off Stuart Pearce. They felt they should have had the job. They felt they did a good enough job. They were charged, they were mandated to keep us up. They kept us up. They thought they should have got an extension of contracts. David Moyes, remember him saying at the time, what he wanted to do next season was bring in a centre-half. He said goals aren't a problem because of Arnautovic and Lanzini were firing. They're doing really well. Anyway, that was that. I think, though, now we have got a very different David Moyes to the David Moyes that we had the first time around. Now, some of that may well be due to the circumstance. It may be circumstantial, and that is he's got better players now. He's under less pressure now, so he can play a more expensive game. Before that, he was firefighting. because we didn't attack that much a lot of the time. It felt our possession was well down. We were more defensive on his first stint. I think between David Moyes' first stint and this stint, he's expanded his game a little bit. Where I think the argument that in the first stint he wasn't as expansive because he was fighting relegation falls down is actually when he came in his second stint. He was also fighting relegation and was much more expansive. If you look after lockdown, much more expansive. He was doing more creative things, certainly with Aaron Cresswell. Did a similar job, really, didn't he, in terms of, eventually converted a winger in Antonio to a striker in the same way he did with Arnautovic. But there's something different about the football. Certainly, there was more allowance for flair, I felt, in there. We were keeping the ball more. So the answer is, what was he doing? Sorry, the question is not the answer. The question is, what was he doing in that time between him getting the sack the first time, or getting released, put it this way, and his second stint at the club? Well, by David Moyes' own admissions, and this is why he went on, if you remember the Europa Championships, he's working for UEFA. It's because he'd basically immersed himself in the European game. He'd made himself available to people like UEFA. David Moyes had not just, he's a workaholic, the man, isn't he? David Moyes not just taken a holiday and basically spent his payoff from West Ham, his £2 million bonus, and his payoff from Man United. No, far from it. He'd gone around Europe to a lot of the big clubs, and a lot of the clubs with really good academies and innovative coaching and sports science and all that type of thing. And he'd gone round and he's done his homework. I can't remember the clubs exactly, and I'm here to be corrected, it's fine. But in essence, I think one of them was Barcelona. Another one might have been Ajax. He went to a number of clubs around Europe. As a student, he said, show me how it's done. He topped up on his coaching and his coaching badges, which, to be fair, David Moyes never really needed coaching badges. If you've managed at a certain level before a certain period in time, you didn't need to do them. He had the experience of life, the experience of managing Everton. He didn't need a certificate to tell him how a football team should be organised. But actually, he went and topped up that. He went and trained with some of the best coaches in world football. Fast forward, he comes back, and he told us this, by the way. If we were listening, and we weren't in his first press conference, because his first press conference, he came back and he started talking about the Red Bull model, and we laughed. He talked about winning football, and we laughed. Winning football matches. Winning football matches is what I do. We had a little chuckle at that. He spoke about, what else did he speak about? It was also the fact that I think that he'd noticed different trends in the game. He said, I've noticed a few trends in the game. Teams tend to get the ball quicker now. Get the ball forward quicker. Not so many passes and things like that. We laughed at that. Oh, yeah, as old Moyesy just trying to justify playing a long ball game. I think it's fair to say he wasn't received, where the red carpet wasn't rolled out. But I do think there's been a change. And actually, I think that was pivotal. That education, that sabbatical where he took and he learnt a little bit more of his trade. I also think there's something else that's crucial here. If you look through his career. Preston, excellent. Everton, sensational, really. I actually think he's doing better now at West Ham than he was at Everton. And the reason I think that, it's a conversation for another time, is because when he was flying high with Everton, it was very much a case of Man United and Arsenal were really good under Arsene Wenger. Chelsea was sort of coming to the fore a bit. You didn't have all of these clubs that there are now with loads of money. And it was, for a lot of his time, certainly his first 5 years at Everton, it was a top two rather than a big Sky Sports 6 or whatever the case may be. I feel there's more competition now. I feel it's harder. That's why I'm more impressed with the job he's doing here. Also, he's done it more quickly. Anyway, done an excellent job at Everton. Got the Man United job, didn't work out. Went to Real Sociedad. It was a brave thing to do, to try and repair his reputation. Didn't work out. Sunderland didn't work out. And I thought it came to West Ham, and he kept us up, but it wasn't thrilling, or not thrilling's probably not the word, convincing enough to persuade a lot of the other clubs to come in and maybe hire him. It just didn't happen. I'm not sorry saying he wasn't offered jobs. I'm pretty sure he would have been, but maybe not the jobs that he wanted or the jobs that he felt would enable him to carry his career forward. I felt David Moyes was in the last chance saloon. So I felt him coming back to West Ham and accepting a job off of somebody he probably didn't want to accept a job off, right? As I wouldn't. I don't know. It's hard to say what you do. And, you know, he's a very driven man. I say I wouldn't. I'm not as driven as he is. But I think if I felt someone had wronged me, like David Sullivan there, and not only got rid of me, but got rid of all my mates as well, I think I'd probably, pride comes before the fall and all the rest of it, but I think I'd probably say to Sullivan, no, you can stick your job. I think I would have done that. But David Moyes had to swallow his pride. And I think he swallowed his pride because he knew it was almost the only job he could get. There wasn't another chance, particularly in the Premier League. This was his chance. He had to come in and he had to prove David Sullivan wrong. He's certainly done that, but he needed the job. Now the dynamic has changed, and I said this, the dynamic of the relationship between Sullivan and Moyes has changed, because actually, by the time Moyes was about to sign his most recent contract, it was David Sullivan that needed David Moyes, rather than the other way round. The balance had tipped a bit anyway, certainly. But I feel that desperation of David Moyes probably knowing this is my last chance. This second stint at West Ham is the chance for me to prove that I am an outstanding manager. It's David Moyes thinking, I know I'm a good manager. I have faith in my ability. I have faith in my decision making. And with that, those foundations there, with a bit of a sprinkle of some of the newer coaching methods, and having had an insight into some of how the fantastic European clubs are run, with a sprinkling of that on top, plus fire in his belly again, which is his last chance. It probably his last chance. If it's failed, his second stint at West Ham, I don't think he was getting another job. I really don't. I think you're done, and certainly not the job you'd want. We've seen these managers that are done. Allardyce is done by and large, isn't he? Really, I thought that the relegation at West Brom finished him off. Really, it was a busted flush. And I might be wrong. He might come back. I suspect he won't. And I think there was a pivotal moment for Moyes. He could have gone sort of the Allardyce way, or can he get back to the way that it was with the promise of Everton that enabled him to get the Man United job? So I actually think that was key. I really do. I think that was absolutely key in getting a sack at West Ham. I didn't think it at the time. David Moyes certainly wouldn't have thought it at the time. But to give him that extra drive, to give him that extra education, to give him that extra motivation to come back the second time and do things, I don't think massively differently. I think, just a smidgen, just a small little bit really. But to actually think, okay, he would have known of the criticism before. I don't get the impression David Moyes sits down and watches this sort of thing, or looks on websites or social media. No chance. Just don't think he does. But he would have been aware. You can't insulate yourself from the noise of the fans totally. He would have been aware that he wasn't massively popular to retain his job the first time around, and he would have understood what it was, which is, the football's not quite exciting enough. And that's why I don't care about it. I don't think we as West Ham fans care about the tippy-tappy. We really don't. And we've proved that now. Actually, you can cross the ball in from a corner and head it in and we'll be happy and we'll bounce up and down and sing. It's not got to be. I think there's a lot of the fallacy, the West Ham way, a lot of that is that you've got to play it like Trevor Brooking. You've got to bring the ball out like Bobby Moore or dribble like Devonshire. Not necessarily. I really don't think so. As long as you give us reason to cheer, you work hard and you attack that goal, then we're behind you. And I think he probably changed it up slightly, but I also think his belief system changed once he probably saw what the other clubs were doing. He probably thought, I think there was one game, I might have it slightly wrong, because people were making a bit of a, against Liverpool, people were saying, we only had 30% possession. I definitely remember a 23% possession game in his first stint. And I don't think this was against wonderful teams either, by the way. It might have just been a half, or there was something, but I remember seeing a stat flashing up at one point where we had 90% possession, and it was for most of the game. It wasn't like one of those ones possession in the last 5 minutes. That was under Moyes in his first stint. And I think he probably, even himself, went round Europe and probably thought, actually, I probably need to do a little bit more than this. So I didn't think, it was just an interesting question that Mike put out there. I thought, no. Initially, I wouldn't have considered it at all. But I think it's made him hungrier. And I think it's also, with it being his last chance, I think the thing is, it's taken that, not the dream away. It's a bit like the Antonio one. If Antonio was 23, he would have no chance of keeping him, right? Actually, the fact that he is in his 30s, a little bit injury prone, hasn't really been a striker. No one's going to come in and give us the value of Antonio, all right? Real Madrid ain't coming in to buy Antonio. And I think that sort of goes in our favour with David Moyes as well. The fact that he has tried and failed at Man United, and myself and Joe were discussing this the other day actually, is a massive feather in our cap as well. Not a feather in our cap, but a massive advantage. Because I think he's now tried to live out that dream. He's tried and failed. I doubt he ever regretted leaving Everton to try at Man United, but I'm not sure he'd repeat it again, because you can see how ruthless a lot of these top clubs are with just changing their manager and stuff like that. He was actually linked with a Tottenham job, wasn't he? People were saying, when he hadn't quite signed the contract at West Ham since before the start of this season, that there were rumours, only a couple, very, very, very quiet whispers, let's put it that way, that he might be in for the Tottenham job. Wisely, he didn't take it, because David Moyes doesn't always hit the ground running. I think even his second stint, he didn't hit the ground running. It took lockdown to happen and stuff like that, and it gave him a good couple of months. Well, it's more than a couple of months, wasn't it, when he was able to actually sort through everything, get back for pre-season training, which was Project Restart, and just enabled him to stamp his authority at the club, even though, sort of everybody was locked up at home, sort of thing. You could imagine him getting that job at Tottenham, and you can also imagine him not hitting the ground running. You can imagine Harry Kane being upset, as he seemed to be. Dele Alli sulking, not getting in the team, because I just don't think he'd get the David Moyes team. So on and so on and so forth. And you can imagine Daniel Levy just sacking him. And I think David Moyes knows the value of that now, and I think probably, even though he gave him the boot the first time, I think David Moyes probably does trust Sullivan in as much as he probably knows now that this guy's not going to get rid of him. Basically, they both need one another. They really do. David Moyes could get another job. He could walk into another job now, but I don't think he wants to. I think he's into a project. I think he loves the project, and I think he wants to see it through. And I think very much it gets mentioned about Everton. This is his Everton. What he didn't get to finish at Everton, we're now going to see that philosophy, that plan, that dream carried out to its fullest conclusion at West Ham, which is basically, can you build a club up, and make it really, really special. It's different to Arsene Wenger for two reasons. Number one, he doesn't play the same football as Arsene Wenger. Number two, Arsene Wenger took over from George Graham, who of course had won titles at Arsenal. But I think there's a similar, Ferguson as well, of course. Of course, Man United not won a title in 20 odd years, something like that, before Ferguson came in. So I think there's something happening. There's a dynasty. It may well be the last of the dynasties that we see in many respects. It may well be the last time that an owner allows a manager to have his fingerprints all over the club, in terms of pick the scouts, pick the director of football, choose the doctors, choose the sports science department, all of that stuff. That's now delegated now. Other people do that. Tuchel doesn't do that at Chelsea. They've got a director of football who does all of that, and the director of football reports to the chief executive reports to Roman Abramovich. There's a lot of stages there. I think we might be seeing the last proper dynasty now, where you've got an omnipotent manager. This story, talk about Arsene Wenger. Arsene Wenger was even heavily involved in the design of the stadium at the Emirates there. So that's what you're talking about, and we all know that Alex Ferguson had his hands on absolutely everything at Man United. It's going to be interesting. It already is interesting. Not going to be interesting. Really interesting journey. But I thought, Mikey said that question there. I thought, I like that. It's a really, really good question. I said I'd do the video. I said it last week. But then when I saw David Moyes started talking about it as well, and I understand that he's miffed about it, I understand he looks back with regret, and I understand that David Moyes probably thinks if he'd have stayed on that job, we'd be further down the road by now. And he probably does. He probably thinks, West Ham would be a year further down the line. I'm not so sure. For all the reasons I stated, I think we may have all needed that to happen.